Okay, good morning. So a little bit different. Got some relations I think are used to address the. So I'll talk about it. We'll just do it. On chapter 3, it was pointed out that the section of the book is called the support or the foundation, and that term was created three different ways. The spiritual lineage is the foundation, which you cannot have unity to pursue the path. The Chitta was also a foundation or support in the sense that it was the basis for undertaking the practice. And then this itself as a foundation, the doctrine of the qualities that are needed to be practiced are a foundation in that when you accept to them, then now you progress and develop. So the third chapter starts that third way of understanding the word support. So this is called one's own and others' aims. It's the title of the chapter. But if we look at the beginning, this is embedded in the text the author's sort of framework for the text, which I'll talk about that a little bit in the introduction, which is to say that he gives there's a table of contents, but at various places in the text he gives us some kind of structure to what's followed. So he says in the second paragraph, the ways Bodhisattva practice refers to the combination of everything that is included in the following three categories. And important because this is kind of his way of the rest of the first book. So this is chapters 3 through 18. And so those subjects in relation to which the Bodhisattvas train themselves. Section, and that covers chapters 3 through 7. The manner in which they train themselves, and then that's actually what the subject matter of training itself. That is, what are the practices? The 8 is a very interesting chapter. It's called the spiritual lineages of the powers. And I remember reading that when I would look at this text long before I ever thought to translate it. I just didn't know what that meant. Just the spiritual lineage of the powers. What powers? I have no idea what it's talking about. So spiritual lineages of powers are 10 powers of the Buddha. Right? We mentioned that comes to the end of the text. And lineages of those powers are the kinds of knowledge and practice that you have to take to develop each one of them individually. So there's kind of the seed element of practice that leads to the first of the 10 powers. And there's another element of practice that he identifies with the second power. And the first two in particular. And then Tower 3 through 10 are in a topic of instruction. So in instruction, there's sort of 8 key points of how it goes about giving instruction. As a token for oneself, that one receives should also, consideration these same elements. And those elements involve, as we talked about yesterday in Getsaje's commentary, how you lead the disciple. You have to evaluate the disciple. You have to have the ability to determine, what is the nature of that person's, practice. What is it that person is naturally drawn to, and that sort of is an indication of his or her, so to speak. And then, having gauged that, then you consider what is the level of intellect, how sharp the person's faculties are, what degree should the instruction, in what manner should the instructions be presented, and so on. And then what is the specific instruction to give this person? And so there's a list of 8 points that within this idea of how to give instruction to someone or to receive instruction yourself as a practitioner. And those 8 corresponds to one other of the remaining 10 Buddha's powers. It's very interesting because there's kind of causal connection between, it's saying these 10 things are the causes by which you will eventually come to attain the Buddha's 10 powers. It's a very interesting idea, which I hope we have a little bit to cover. So that's in chapter 8, which is the first chapters that deal with practice. Following that, chapters 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14 each address of the 6 paramitas. Then 15 addresses a topic which some of you probably know. There are 4 sort of principles that are the 4. It literally means collecting or drawing, attracting persons to the Dharma. One of them is generosity, which is not taught again because you've already covered under the first paramita. But the second one is called agreeable speech. And I don't remember how to translate it. It's conduct, I think. Fourth one is then Dharma means conformity in behavior. So it's a very important area in terms of the Bodhisattva's efforts. You have already developed yourself, and so now you're in a position to develop others. And so the 4 principles are how you go about doing that. So Greech in particular is, it means things, not just of which is just to be a pleasant person. When you come in contact with people, to greet them, to ask about them, to be sort of cordial. But that's not the whole meaning of agreeable speech. The essence of agreeable speech is teaching Dharma, that form of agreeable speech. So it's giving instruction to others. And meaningful activity is very interesting, and I'm very challenging. I've never really tried to put into practice myself. It means it's not that you teach the disciples, you ensure that they practice it. So it's a way of trying to induce the disciples to actually put into practice what you've taught them. Right? And the final one is, in addition to that, you as a teacher, you have to be a model. You have to practice what you preach, so to speak. Because if you don't, then your followers will say, well, why do it if you're not doing it? I think. So this is a very important subject. And that discussion of, well, hopefully get to it. At the end, there's 3 chapters. One of them is puja. Puja means to worship. The 3 ratnas, very, very important topic. Seva is how to teacher, how to relate to the teacher and maintain her spiritual, kind of. And then the last one of the three in this chapter 16 is the immeasurables. In that chapter in particular, the immeasurables, the four immeasurables of kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity. Among those, they're discussed in not great detail, except for compassion. And in the subject compassion, Asana presents 153 ways to meditate on compassion. It's an absolutely incredible, relation. It starts out. It's I think it's probably. There's one way to practice meditation. There's two ways to practice compassion. There's three ways to practice. So from 1 to 10, and that's half of them. And then another group of 55, coming up of 110. And these are only two in the Lamrim Chemo. Lamrim Chemo says, and subject of meditating compassion is, the way you practice compassion in the sevenfold instruction of cause and effect. She said, by the way, in the Bodhisattva Bhumi, there is this presentation of 153 ways to meditate on. So that's very detailed. If you're inclined or if you have the opportunity, you consider it. So I'm going to talk there about the nature of great compassion. So that kind of ends the the second thing, the manner in which they train themselves, how they train themselves, what are the elements of practice. And those individuals who train themselves, the final chapters address the qualities that bodhisattvas are meant to gain. And the chapter talks about what are the individuals that are exemplars of the bodhisattva, path. Kind of completes the this book of the text. So, said that, we really have anywhere near the opportunity to go through all of that. That we can do, and we do have. So here we have chapter 3, one's own and others' aims. I'll say this about it. So there is the definition of in the context of taking. It says a definition of Buddha. One of the definitions of Buddha is. Then I won't bother to Tibetan. The two aims. This aims here, one's own and one's other's aims. Kachimba means then to the state in which the two aims have been perfected, and an individual who has perfected those two aims then becomes the ultimate object of refuge. Definition of Buddha. Ultimate object of refuge, ultimate thing, especially for Mahayana. When you take refuge as an honest, the you take refuge in is Buddhahood. You seek as your own goal. You don't just to achieve the Dharma Ratna or the Sangha Ratna. Mainly, this is also something that is discussed in the Uttara Shastra, that the three vehicles, like the Bodhisattvas take refuge mainly in the Buddha Ratna. Calls a way to take refuge, was you take refuge in beings who have themselves already attained perfection of those two aims. And another way of taking refuge, would you take refuge in your own future attainment of that perfection of two aims, yourself. That for the two aims, perfection aim relating to yourself is the Dharmakaya. Relating to us is the Rupakaya. The perfection of the aim relating to us, because the Rupakaya is how you exarma to others. So here we have this concept of important for yourself and what is important others. So that term, Rangdun, Zhendun, we discussed in many ways. It's a very interesting. We will just look at that very briefly. Okay. So he says. Objects first. So these things in relation to which you train yourself. What does that mean exactly? Is that these are kind of aims that, as a Bodhisattva, always have in mind as you're practicing. What are the aims? You want to fulfill your own interests and you that relate to others. That's one aim. You have what that means. What does it mean to fulfill your own interests? Fulfill your own interests means to ripen yourself, to do qualities in yourself, the qualities that are kind of common with a Buddha, qualities that lead you to reach Buddhahood. So developing those in yourself is fulfilling your own aim, ripening yourself. The fulfillment of the aims of others, that's developing the ability to the point where you're capable of doing it, then to carry out activities which will directly help ripen others. What's very important for Bodhisattva, how do you strike a balance between the two? Should in fact be more concerned about developing yourself, or should be more concerned about just going out and doing what you can for anybody that you come in contact with anywhere? The idea, in my understanding, is that in the beginning, latter is inappropriate because you're not really capable of doing that much for others. It doesn't mean it doesn't help people. Don't just make your soul, soul or your soul that you apply yourself to. You take care of your own mind first. You're not capable of benefiting others in a meaningful way. Then what are you doing by, tell people what to do, kind of. So that's the first one, and there are 7 things here. So one's own aim, other aims. That's the first 2. Then is number 3 is the meaning of reality. So that's in the chapter. Chapter 4 is the meaning of reality. Reality, if you look at chapter 4, it doesn't only mean emptiness. Emptiness is the highest form of understanding to be gained. Other elements of knowledge that one needs to develop. So in Buddhism, there are 2 ultimate forms of knowledge: the selflessness of the person and the selflessness of entities. The selflessness of the person is associated with attaining liberation. It's the main knowledge that brings that about. And then in the Mahayana, the self-entities is thought to be a deeper realization that real, in a way that they appear to be real. So that's where the 2 schools of the Yogacara and the Magga come to play. So how to interpret, what is the ultimate nature of things? So my is whether you are mainly concerned about developing understanding of selflessness of the person, which is primarily the means of uprooting all the mental afflictions, or you're primarily focused on an understanding of selflessness of entities, with a knowledge that illuminates the objects that block your understanding from seeing things as they truly are. And is the main means of achieving enlightenment. Okay. The basic teaching of the 4 Noble Truths and the 5 skandhas is, I believe, indispensable, which is without understanding that whatever the person is going to be limited. Even any ability to understand selflessness of entities. In order to gain that kind of knowledge, you cannot ignore or skip over the kind of basic doctrine which is associated with teaching 4 Noble Truths. it's not sort of the language of our everyday discourse. What the fundamentals are, and the fundamentals are not the way we ordinarily talk about who we are, what we are. For developing a special language that will give you a different way to think about yourself than the way we ordinarily think about ourselves. The ordinary way we think about ourselves is that we are real persons, and through time, and that they're real. We have to develop kind of a vocabulary and a language that gives us the means to undo that kind of ordinary way of thinking. And there really isn't any shortcut to that, but that subject kind of get addressed. Anyway, that's under the meaning of reality, as far as I'm concerned, really addressed here, per se. I talked about that in another book, which I wrote, called Inner Science, which is about 5 skandhas, and I wrote a long introduction to it, explaining what I was just talking about. I'd invite you to listen to that if you care to. So it's saying, as a bodhisattva, though, nevertheless, there's no substitute. You cannot not learn about emptiness and practice Mahayana. There's no way. And we're going to get to a point. We're going to read a passage from that, which is, I think, very good. So you have to be concerned about self. What is necessary for you to know what you're doing that's to you in terms of your own spiritual development? What you need to know that's to others in terms of their spiritual development? What about reality? How does that play into that process? Then there's a chapter about spiritual power. That's very interesting. That suggests, implies that bodhisattvas are expected clairvoyance and all kinds of miraculous powers to impress others, but to give them to more accurately assess others. Know what the other person is thinking. A lot easier to know what's appropriate to say to them or behave around them. And those qualities are taken for granted as being attainable through samadhi. They're sort of the byproduct of samadhi. One point of concentration to in the kind of mental states that bring spiritual powers. So there's a whole discussion of that. But the implication is that a bodhisattva, level, those instrumental in helping others. So thinking about, helping in a mundane sort of way. I mean, we're not only about not being just, people, we're talking about developing the ability to begin to help, if more people, all with your, mental powers. So this kind of super normal kind of, abilities are possible. It's then sitting around the kitchen table and talking, right? So is a limit, that the bodhisattvas are aiming at in their, spiritual quest. Then the next chapter is ripening of sentient beings and ripening of Buddha's qualities in oneself. They're both in one chapter. It's called ripening. And the very precise meaning of that word, ripening. We understand spiritual ripening means spiritual development. But more specifically, it means ripening. Many of you maybe hear, the word, some temples are called mindriling, right? Mindriling. That's probably a word that people have heard. That is ripening and liberating. Ripen, drill is liberate. So and you can't become liberated until your mind is ripened. The idea is that. So ripen means your spiritual development is brought to a point where you have the ability to develop the transcendent path and destroy the obstacles. And that's liberation. But, it takes a lot to get to the point where you're actually capable of destroying the obstacles permanently, So you got to be brought to that point where you have that capability. The whole process is called ripening, and that's what it's meant. So when you're trying to teach the Dharma to others, the idea you're trying to do is you're trying to raise them to the point where they can a transcendent path. So that's what ripening is about. To others, and the ripening of yourself too, which is you can't want to do that. You have to develop those qualities in yourself that give you the ability to do that. So that assumes a lot. I mean, in a way, the Mahayana sort of takes it for granted that you have to become somebody who is not in a way that means that you feel superior, but in a way that you have the capacity to those who are not as able themselves. So it's a funny kind of sort of presumption about Mahayana, but it's actually there. It's sort of that's kind of you're sort of yourself, and in doing that you become really more advanced than others. Not something to revel in per se. It's just the idea is that's what helps. That you do that. Why? Because you want to help others. And if you help others, you've got to be able to. And the way to do that is to develop yourself. So the idea of ripening spiritual qualities of a Buddha in oneself. So be attentive to. These are sort of goals. These are sort of things that are always that sort of give you your perspective as a bodhisattva. Right? This is what I'm trying to do. And the last one is enlightenment itself. Of course, that is the goal. These 7 topics are the rings that are guiding the bodhisattva's efforts. They're not the practice per se, but things that are elements of the practice that are essentially important, especially emptiness. And that marks these 7. Then from there begins the actual training and discussion of the practice that will help you to, in fact, attain these various temporary and ultimate goals. Okay. The next chapters, 3, 5, 6, 7. Run against the clock. So the first one is the thing about one's own aims or one's own interests and the interests of others. He says, reverse. No, not that. Okay. What are one's own and others' aims? On next page, there are 10 different points that are addressed in relation to this topic of what is it that you need to be concerned about in relation to what matters for you? What is it that you need to be concerned about in what matters to others? And the first one is the quality of exclusivity and related to others. It's a rather technical thing, it's kind of a very, kind of discussion. See it carefully, you kind of miss the point. At one level it's saying, exclusively interested in your own aims? Of course not, right? Well, what if you're exclusively interested in the aims of others and not care about yourself at all? Lojong, that's in fact the goal, is to, replace concern for yourself with concern for others. And it is kind of leaving behind that you want to do anything for others and you're not thinking about yourself at all. But sort of it doesn't completely jibe with that. That's kind of a more, that's a very, in Lojong, which I value, but the point made here is somewhat a little bit more kind of from down to earth perspective. So it says here, example, page 36. Following are examples, last paragraph on 36. This idea of exclusivity. We're not exclusively interested in ourselves alone. In fact, we're interested in others. But then the question is, how much should we be interested in others as we pursue our own interests? Because The following are examples of a bodhisattva's pursuit of one's own aims that are exclusive. He or she should fully understand and reject. It's kind of interesting. So the example of the person who's not even a Dharma person at all. It's kind of the rank of a secular person who doesn't care about religion whatsoever. That kind of person is seeking after and experiencing forms of enjoyment, who is desirous of indulging pleasure for him or herself. So I mean, just get those out of your whatever your life offers you, and just go for. That's the extreme of who is exclusively interested in his or her own aims, and the aims happen to be of no significance spiritually whatsoever. In other words, it's like you're not with Dharma as far as Dharma is concerned. So that's an example of one of interest. We're supposed to be. So of course, if we think of it, well, about ourselves, we're not that person, right? We don't see ourselves that way. But do those kinds of thoughts enter in thinking? I mean, how much do we think we need, in fact, to enjoy ourselves, go to a show, watch TV, do things for, quote, fun? How much importance do we put on that? Is it necessary? How would we be if we were more ascetic and completely eliminated any thoughts whatsoever? I'm not suggesting that. In fact, the Dharma is something that requires. What should I? You might want to be. There's an example of the person who becomes interested in Dharma, and this is talked about in the Lama, where a person begins about the Dharma and says, "Oh, this is for me," and decide to become, one who's practicing Dharma all the time. They just say, "I'll become a monk," or "I'll become a nun," or "I'll meditator." It's a very common sort of to the Dharma, but naive, and it hasn't been tested at all. The question of whether in fact have the opportunity and the resources, and there's any likelihood of being able to put aim into practice, you haven't really thought about it. You try, you come up with against that obstacle, and according to way to talk about it, say, well, typically what will happen to a person like that is, they'll meet with something that frustrates them, and then get that frustration. Okay, can't do it, forget it, game over. I guess I'm not going to be that person. Sort of, rape as not ridicule, but ridiculous in a way. I mean, it's a word for it. Ninjum pusu. Ninjum pusu means pronunciation. The hair stand on hand, saying that it's something very transient, and it's on a person's real understanding of himself or herself. On the other hand, if you are knowledgeable and you are, have the ability, and you do, in fact, dedicate yourself to, life, perhaps, even be a person who becomes, the yogini. Who there are such people. We don't see them because they divorce themselves from society. Even, someone who, So where do we fit in the picture between those two streams? So we have to. That's a challenge, is to lives and see what works for us. I push for the more radical rather than the more timid, but that's Uh, so here, so some people, then here's the second example, is the person who seeks Dharma. Seeking after and retaining of Dharma instruction that Buddhas and Bodhisattvas have taught. Bodhisattva who exercises stinginess regarding the Dharma. Okay? Means, oh, okay, I'm a very serious Dharma student, and you really are, diligent, and you try to learn as much as you can, but you're not interested in, you don't learn the Dharma so that you can help others, and you rarely ever try to share with others. So that is a goal to the Bodhisattva ideal. Transgressions. Hopefully we'll get to this moment. The way that is engaged in by a Bodhisattva whose desires of being reborn in a celestial realm. He or she initiates practices of morality and effort and undertakes to cultivate meditative absorption and wisdom in order to attain rebirth in a celestial realm. It doesn't appeal to many Americans, but the idea of, to be born in the divine realms, appealing, it certainly in a couple times was, and it was often, really, that's what people thought was liberation, was to be born amongst the gods. So, if that's an aim for practicing Dharma, that's an aim which considered Dharma, right? If you practice morality, you're born in higher realms. If you practice a very, powerful form of morality, very strong morality, you will rise above human existence to the divine realm. And so, that's for me. That's what some people in some, have an ultimate goal, so to speak. So a person who's that's considered kind of the kibuchungu, the little practitioner's aim. So it's a form of Dharma, but not a pure Dharma, not a form of Dharma that seeks an ultimate goal. That's a form of one's own interests exclusively, and such a limited way that a Bodhisattva abandoned it. So this is a progression. The progression is from the person who's in sense pleasures, as that's the most important thing to them. And then one is the person who seeks for instructions but won't share it. Second is the person who's reborn in heaven, like that. So it goes on like that. And it is interesting. So it goes like that, and then it goes in the other direction. So he first of all, he portrays these 8, I believe, no, 10 examples. And if you take the last one, they become more sort of something that might actually happen, in the message that you might see in a supposed Dharma setting. Let's say you are a practitioner, and you say you become very proficient. Say you, in fact, you get some notoriety and to be, want to learn from you, and then you can follow. If your following is very good, they might, try to do things to make your life easier. So if you like that, if that, appeals to you, continue to keep a following, because it makes life enjoyable, and you let people sort of, devotion to you. Well, that's very good either, right? Here it says, number 6 on page 37. The attacking of a group of spiritual followers in a manner that is contrary to the Dharma and not in keeping with the Dharma by a Bodhisattva who is desirous of obtaining acts of service from those followers for himself and tracks of following in order to obtain such acts of service. I'm enamored of your teacher status. And these are very, so the meaning of this book is that all of this is Bodhisattva related. All of this is from the point of view of the Bodhisattva's, challenge. How does one go about actually trying to be a Bodhisattva? And the examples that appear in this book are just after sentence, if you think about them carefully, is telling you to do, what not to do. There. This is chapter 3, one's aims and the aims of others. There's a lot of other things that are in here that are equally interesting. It's just things that I want to focus. Okay, let's go to chapter 4. Chapter 4 is the nature of reality. And it discusses, if you'll see on page, this is page 63, categories of reality. Says so he doesn't reality he doesn't limit it to although of course that's the main subject matter in the chapter. He says actually 4 areas of knowledge that you need to become proficient at, which is recognized as true in the world. So he says that's kind of like what one can identify in his or her own experience. And the examples that he gives are just sort of everyday things. But he doesn't address it. I take from this that this is in fact, this is where you learn about the 5 skandhas. 5 skandhas are in fact the Buddha's way of talking about ordinary experience. It talks about subject matter. He's sort of trying to give you a new vocabulary, properly think of your everyday experience. And it doesn't include those 4 erroneous ideas that things are permanent, right? That things that are pleasurable, but we falsely think are pleasurable. That there is a real self, but we think so. So the 5 skandhas are sort of a model which used to sort of reinvent our experience, our ordinary experience, and then we can in fact function in such a way. It's an interesting idea. I don't know whether it strikes the same way, but for me, I'm struck by the fact that we unfortunately labor under the delusion of a real self. And what we don't realize is that we almost cannot think. Not that we cannot, but we almost do not think other than in corporate sense of our own individuality as a real thing. Buddha's proposition is that false, that's the root of all our suffering, implies if there is self, why didn't we function if we didn't have any no self? I mean, could we? The reflect about is what would it be like? How would we be thinking in such a way that sort of left out any notion of self? That's a proposition. In terms of dharma practice, totally possible. You're really focusing on virtuous qualities. Those virtuous qualities have no essential, connection with no self. The everyday experience, we're saying, where are you going? Who are you? Or I'm so and so. There is a nominal sense of self, but we are sophisticated enough to use that language without built into it the trappings of that area of self. It's hard, but not impossible. Anyway, so through here it says then the second category of reality is logic, what you can determine by logic. Now, this is not necessarily refer to things that are directly observable. Impermanence is not something that we can see. Subtle impermanence, at any rate. But we can derive, we can deduce that it must be impermanent. How would change be possible? Logic can determine that for us, and then we can have some kind of understanding of those propositions. That's another element of reality. Then the third and the fourth mentioned here are selflessness of the person and the selflessness of entities, right? Here he describes them as the object. On page 63, at the very end, it says, the object that is perceived by the knowledge that removes the obscurations of the mental afflictions. That means selflessness of the person. It doesn't only mean the selflessness of the person, it means the direct realization of the selflessness of the person. That's knowledge, right? It's a transcendent knowledge. That's the object. That selflessness of the person that's perceived by a transcendent knowledge, and when it does perceive that object, the mental afflictions are uprooted. So that's an Arya's understanding of selflessness of the person. So we're talking about ordinary knowledge. So, and so that's central to the Hinayanists. Also cultivate mind, not exclusively, and it's not the highest form of knowledge. Fourth one is the object that is perceived by the knowledge that removes the obscuration to that which needs to be known. And I say that very literally. To that which needs to be known, which means that which is known by a Buddha. So, which gives us unlimited knowledge. Then that, in order to gain that, we have to perceive selflessness of entities. And that was subtle obstacles. So this is the fourth of reality he talks about. So, having formulated them, it doesn't. He talks about the last one, which is emptiness in the Yogacara school. You want to delve into that, and I think if you were going to take time to try to develop an understanding of emptiness, go for the Yamika point of view. And if you have extra time, fine, learn Yogacara. But most our time is limited. So Chandakirti, when it comes to ultimate reality, and you can learn that through the Lama room and learn instruction directly from a teacher. I was teaching here a couple of years ago that Gyo Kensor gave on meditating, how to meditate to understand.
Can I ask one very silly question? In this chapter, page 82, he quotes that the intent of the Blessed One declared it would be better for someone to hold a view that believes in a real person than for someone to grasp the meaning of emptiness.
Yes, right, okay.
And of course, sitting here trying to read about the 4 different schools and different ways, and I'm just like, oh my God.
Well, what we're talking about, it's actually subject. I don't really want to go into it in any depth, but there's a passage in here. What did you say? 83 was it?
82. It's right before the footnote. He declares that.
Let's see. Oh yeah. It talks about. It's the very last line on page 75. He said, "If you understood that the following 2 types of individuals are lost to the spiritual system of Dharma Vinaya." He said, this Dharma Vinaya is a kind of another way of describing Buddhism, Dharma Vinaya. There's a footnote here that tells you what that means. So there are 2 people who, by their misunderstanding of the Buddha's teaching, destroy themselves and end up being nihilist. Number 1 is the individual who do ascribe to the form, underlying substance form, a unique characteristic does not truly exist, represents an essence formulated by designating a certain, then mistakenly adheres to the existence of such dualists. Those are those who believe that the 5 skandhas are real. So are lost to the Mahayana because they can never understand reality, because they cling to the idea that things are real. So if you try to teach them emptiness, they will either they were most likely to reject it. And that's one of the vows in Mahayana. Correct. One of the vows is to try to teach to a person who is not suitable. And if you do, you incur a transgression because you harm to that person by kind of forcing them to reject what you teach them. Okay. One extreme. The other extreme, individual who by repudiating the substance that truly exists. So there's an ultimate reality that truly exists. Truly exists. The Chara view of emptiness as ultimate truth in the form of an ineffable essence. Okay. So the form of reality that truly exists as something that's ineffable, something that's beyond words, beyond conception, non-dual, nevertheless real. Of emptiness. Mikan has rejected that. So Mikan is a nihilist. And is kind of, by definition, who will have any basis for establishing the validity of the trainings and so on. So, let's see, oh yeah. Six, oh yeah. She's talking about the second one in particular on page 81, 82. And basically, this is an example of where Asanga is rejecting the Madhyamika school. Chandakirti, who's coming several centuries later, his central work, where he explains Nagarjuna's root treatise, it's called Sanapada. In one, I forget which one it is. We have been accused of being a preeminent nihilist. He used a term. That term is actually here. I was trying to see if I could find it. It's footnotes. And that is, I believe, that is Chandakirti referring to the Bodhisattva Bhumi passage of Asanga. And well, we're getting off topic. One of the things that he criticizes is the Yogacara position. The initial Madhyamika school of Nagarjuna, then the initial position of Yogacara, which is rejecting the Nagarjuna's position as true. That is followed by several centuries where the Yogacara school never died. The Yogacara school existed up until the time of Atisha. Teaching to Tibet, most important teachers who lived in somewhere in what's Indonesia, and from whom he received teachings on the Abhidhamma of all texts, was a Yogacaran teacher. And initially, Atisha apparently adhered to that position. There's a very famous Indian scholar, probably was more than Atisha in India, albeit Tibet, and that was Shanti, a great scholar, a great poet, a great tantric yogi, and also a charan. Atisha to task. I actually mentioned this in the introduction. He took Atisha to task, rejecting his own teacher's philosophical position. I don't know if you remember that. The Yogacara view, proponents until the time it disappeared from India. And I would say the Yogacara school is much more influential in China, in Chinese Buddhism, than it was in Tibetan Buddhism. What is had in Tibetan Buddhism is maybe subject consideration. Galupa's school is pure prasangika. So, go back. Yoga school arises. There are various kind of revisions of the school, kind of reaction to that, where Madhyamikans kind of synthesized Yogacara and Madhyamika and made the explanation of relative truth come to the views of Yogacara school, changed the notion that ultimate truth conformed to Nagarjuna's original position. And to use the view of the Abhisankara, mentioned Vimuktasena, Hardra, and those scholars, those were proponents of that type of school. Madhyamikans, among them Veka, for instance, Chandrakirti, and Chandrakirti's, what's it? Buddhapalita. These are persons who did not, according to the way they're interpreted by Galupas, did not agree to any of the propositions of the Yogacara school. Did not rate any of those idealistic views. So, the history of Buddhist philosophy is kind of complicated. That's what he was talking about here, Asanga. All right. Let me go back. Where are we here? And he says very strong things about being such a person. Like, forget it. He even says, don't associate with those people. There'll be influence on you. Of course, well, anyway, I'll leave it at that. It's something to reflect on. Oh. I mean, Nagarjuna himself talks about nihilism. He talks about nihilism, and he says, emptiness is snake by its tail. It will you, and it will you to become a nihilist. So he warns against nihilism himself. Okay, I want to read you one passage here, which to me is all relate to and is very important, I think, to bear in mind. This is 69. It says, non-wisdom is a great means. Very powerful kind of proposition. Although I remember over the years thought, I think things like this. Well, if everything is empty, if it really exists, what are there to feel compassion towards, right? So the idea of emptiness is sort of seems antithetical to the Bodhisattva ideal. Like if there aren't real beings, there are people who are really suffering, then what reason is there for me to feel compassion? If they're all, phantasms, if they're all, fictions of my imagination, why, develop compassion for them? A very naive and a very misguided, deduction of what the implications of emptiness are. Okay, so I've had conversations with people where I was trying to respond to that. It's understandable that people might have that thought, but the point is that is totally misguided. And here is a statement which gives you a sense of why and what's kind of backwards, right? He said, the big challenge for the Bodhisattva is that the Bodhisattva, there is a proposition that once you understand selflessness of the person fully enough, you understand what it takes to get rid of all your suffering. Process, you understand how you would go about engaging in that process, and if presumably you chose to, you could bring about that result with fairly short time, at most 6 or 7 lifetimes, at most. From that point of view, that is nothing. And the Bodhisattva path is eons. immeasurable periods of countless eons that you have to dedicate yourself to personal enlightenment. So, the idea of generating the knowledge that will destroy your suffering and bring to an end is, anathema to the Bodhisattva, because it attaches you in a permanent way from the world and prevents you from having any ability to have any effect on the world. You enter a quiescent state where you're kind of in this nirvanic sleep, and be there for great lengths of time, kalpas upon kalpas, and finally the Buddhas will away you from that state and present with the fact that the path. So that's the thing to avoid. So what to do is you're supposed to develop a form of knowledge, but not actualize it to the degree that you will kind of remove yourself from samsara. Because is supposed to be in samsara, but not of samsara. Okay, so the challenge though. So go about doing that. And here, a beautiful description, we says, without you do it. It doesn't say it quite in those words, but that's the implication. Emptiness gives you a kind of mental state which allows you to negotiate samsara in such a way that you're impervious to the disturbance that samsara might otherwise create in you, and that with it not be able to negotiate samsara as a bodhisattva. So to me, it's a very telling and very important, instruction. So let's read the passage. Okay, so it says. So he says the substance that is free of both the former being and the other kinds of non-being. So he's talking about reality in the Yar sense, the absence of duality. And there are things about the Yogacara way of describing emptiness which are, perfectly acceptable to the Madhyamika absence of duality, ineffable realm, stuff like that. But anyway, so he says, this absence of duality is the middle way that avoids these two extremes, is described as being unsurpassed. It's because that the knowledge of this form of reality is possessed by the Buddhas, the Blessed Ones, is perfectly pure. On the other hand, the knowledge of it that is possessed by Bodhisattvas should be understood to represent a form of the path that is being pursued by those who are still undergoing training. So if you are a Bodhisattva who has achieved, by the way, you don't have to hold back to perceive emptiness. There's no need to delay realizing emptiness. There's a need to delay destroying the mental afflictions. It's a proposition. How do you do one without doing the other? So this wisdom, he's talking about wisdom about ultimate reality, which the Bodhisattvas cultivate in a way that still represents the path, he says, is great means thinking about the attainment of unsurpassed truth and complete enlightenment. So they're saying they don't have the perfect knowledge of ultimate truths that the Buddhas have. Whatever knowledge they do have is a great means that helps along the way, immeasurably. And he says, why is that? Why is it such a great means? The left follows. Bodhisattva who applies him or herself using conviction. This is a point they have not yet achieved direct realization of emptiness. So the path of they're a Bodhisattva, but they're not of Arya. About the meaning of emptiness during various births, as he or she continues to be reborn in samsara, in order to ripen sentient beings and also to ripen the qualities of a Buddha in him or herself, will understand samsara as it truly is. And that will understand that samsara is not real. So awareness of samsara as being illusion. People say this thing in texts about yoga. And you are teaching about it, and there is this idea that yogis and yoginis can their dream state and still be aware that they're in their dreams. To me, that's ordinary, but I think that when the subject comes up in teaching, inevitably people say, "Oh, I do that all the time," and I just shake my head. I said, "Really? Okay, glad to hear it." You know. Anyway, it's like that. Okay, this is saying is me. Look at samsara, falsity of samsara, that it's unreal. In your conscious mind, as you are experiencing it and present in it. So it's analogous to, usually when you dream something, you wake up, you have the awareness, oh, that was a dream. And you think, well, that was a dream, this is false, not real. So the extraordinary thing is that, well, it would really be extraordinary if you're dreaming, this is just my mind creating this. So that's analogous to what the Bodhisattva should do in their waking state, is they are seeing things that look as real, as substantial, as good, but it ain't. And they're aware of it. And what this is a very powerful form of equanimity. You don't take it. You don't react. You just observe. He's saying that person, samsara as it truly is, that Bodhisattva will also not allow his mind to become upset, and I add in brackets, overly upset by samsara. It means the unsatisfactory nature of samsara. It's not to say that samsara suffering is not suffering. One should know that samsara is suffering. Maybe it's still what we nominally call suffering, and it's still something that we nominally want to get rid of. So the Bodhisattva, no less than the Hinayana, sees suffering as something undesirable, something that wants to part with, but not much so that he or she puts everything out of their mind and sets about only that task of eliminating suffering of samsara. It says here, the knowledge of emptiness and is your ability to tolerate the suffering of samsara. That says, through having contemplated the aspects of impermanence. So you can be totally aware of impermanence and unsatisfactoriness of samsara, but not in a way that it traumatizes you. Or maybe that's an extreme way to put it. But emptiness, we lay emptiness onto the relative truth nature of suffering. It is the ability to accept it, shall we say. About to understand samsara as it truly is, and you don't have an understanding of emptiness, right? Unable to maintain a mind that is largely unaffected by all the mental afflictions of desire, hatred, and ignorance. So, Kirti's point of view, I have to mix here. Kirti is of the view that if something is self-existent, you stop yourself from developing desire and hatred. If you think of self-existent, it's a matter of just one step beyond that to see it as an unattractive self-existent or an attractive self-existent. If attractive self-existent, you stop from developing desire. If it's attractive self-existent, you can't stop yourself from developing aversion. Existent, you can do neither. You can just look at it as it is and not be the so to speak. So without an understanding of emptiness, you won't be able to keep yourself from being sucked in by falsity of samsaric existence. So you're been by the mental afflictions. Bodhisattva who can attain a mind that is largely unaffected by the mental afflictions will become a person who wanders continuously in samsara with an agitated mind. And a person neither ripen the qualities of a Buddha in himself nor ripen other sentient beings. That's a good bodhisattva if you don't have a pretty good understanding of emptiness. But you're able to carry out the bodhisattva, higher forms of bodhisattva practice. You're able to interact with other beings in samsara very effectively as long as things are self-existent. There is, okay, now let me, I put this in the two, but there is a transgression that relates to this. In the okay, 283. I don't know how I came up with that, but I came up with this. Starting samsara with complacence. There's one of the secondary misdeeds. This is a wording from, I told you, Chandra Gomi wrote a poem about Bodhisattva morality. And verses. But verses actually just enumerate the transgressions. And in the Bodhisattva, in the confession, we basically use Chandra Gomi's verses. So this line, sorry. Chikadrova is a kind of an ambiguous phrase. To go alone, or to make that your sole path. Means then to think that it's yourself into samsara, because you're a bodhisattva, so you don't have to worry about the mental afflictions, because it doesn't matter. You know, you're not trying to get rid of your mental afflictions and get upset. Well, you know, and go back and tell people. So I'm not concerned about subduing the mental afflictions. Continue the bodhisattva practice is a guide to bodhisattva. Here he says, this point here about if you don't understand emptiness, you'll be able to negotiate samsara without being agitated and mental afflictions. And he says, you'll be a person who wanders continuous samsara. You don't bring anybody else out of samsara. You're not going to get yourself out of samsara. You're not going to help anybody else get out of samsara. You're just swimming with the fish. And it's not a happy ocean to be in. Here he makes a vow relating to this. He says, any bodhisattva who holds the following view or profess to others, this is page 283, okay, commits an offense and a transgression, and he requires an afflicted offense. It means this is an afflicted offense is more serious because it's done out of misunderstanding, wrong thinking. So, if you have this idea, Bodhisattva should not abide with an attitude that delights in nirvana. Right? To think nirvana as something desirable, something that I wish I would reach peace or free from samsara suffering. But it's not have to think that. Not only doesn't have to think that, shouldn't think that Bodhisattva is supposed to be in samsara. Person says, I don't like the idea of nirvana, because they misguidedly think that's kind of a hinayana position. Right? So Bodhisattva should not abide with an attitude that delights in nirvana. Rather, he or she should abide with an attitude that turn away from nirvana. So Bodhisattva should not be in. And you know that there's some sense to that idea. The idea is that we put off seeking nirvana, because doing that, we are able to continue on the path, and the path requires us to engage and cultivate the paramitas, to create merit. So it's reasonable, right? He says, then he or she should not fear the root or secondary mental afflictions, right? The root afflictions, the hatred, ignorance, secondary mental afflictions, pride, jealousy, deception, things like that. He should not fear the root or secondary mental afflictions. He or she should not be striving exclusively to separate his or her mind from them, meaning they should not be only concerned about keeping the mental afflictions in check. After all, you're willingly throwing yourself in samsara so that you can sentient beings, and you're concerned about how long it might take to get to nirvana, because you're not supposed to be focused on nirvana. For it must be pursued by Bodhisattva while remaining in samsara for 3 spans of time that are each made of a countless number of couples. Long haul, I overcome the mental afflictions. What matters, I take myself to others. He says, this point of view is a moral transgression. So, why is it a moral transgression? It should engender delight toward nirvana and aversion for the root and secondary mental afflictions that is a trillion times greater than the delight that a listener, a Hinayanist, cultivates nirvana, and the aversion that he or she, the Hinayanist, develops toward the root and mental afflictions. More focus on keeping the mental afflictions in check. Even a Hinayanist. A Bodhisattva must attain, this is a strong statement, Bodhisattva must attain a state of self-discipline in which his or her mind remains so free of the mental afflictions that though not an arahat, right, you're destroying the mental afflictions. You're remaining a Bodhisattva who has the seeds of the mental afflictions in a different state. But by no means do you allow them to become or active. You keep them in check, right? You have a degree of self-discipline. An arahat, he or she can interact with entities that have the potential to cause the outflows to arise, a synonym for mental affliction, in some manner that the unafflicted state of mind which she possesses is even superior to that of an arahat. Right? The difference is that the Hinayanist, when samsara, the Hinayanist separates himself or herself from society, creates the path. This is not earned to any great degree about what in samsara, not that he's spiteful, but he or she does not focus afflictions, and you do it out of the turmoil of society in particular, and one avoids contact of the ordained monks and nuns is on the periphery of society, on the outside the border of society. And they, once in a while, but for the most part, they're outside of society. That the environment, the ideal environment to destroy the mental afflictions in the possible. The bigger challenge. The Bodhisattva cannot completely separate himself or herself from samsara, but help some kind of self-control. That if one in society, which as a Bodhisattva, at some point you are to do, you have to do it in a way that you become perturbed, even an actual arhat. And I become arahats, they can come into society, they can be beaten, or they can be mistreated, or they can incur kinds of fortune, and that's not particularly pleasant for them. And they don't seek that out, but tolerate it. They would able to remain some kind of equanimity about it. There's many passages about the equanimity that an art has is one, some that would be a hatchet or a pile of gold. They see no difference. They react no mix between them. They don't delight if they see gold, and they don't, alarm to something that would be a weapon. They calm. So that's like equanimity. So Bodhisattva eradicates the mental afflictions, still in their potential form, but have enough. And mainly this comes from the power of the vow and from concentration and wisdom. So the word for vow is in Tibetan domba. It means restrain. It means to be able to hold yourself back from engaging impulsively in moral activities, harmful activities. You do it by levels of one-pointed concentration. They're called dhyana samvara. Dhyana means a one-pointed concentration. So if you do one-pointed concentration, you can, in a way, sublimate the mental afflictions. You can, in fact, be exposed to things that might trigger attachment, for instance. And it would trigger attachment in you by the power of that one concentration. That's a kind of vow. Then the third kind of vow is the contaminated vow. And vow, it's not really the word, it means restraint. So if you achieve the transcendent level and you destroy the mental afflictions, then you're impervious to the mental affliction. So the same word as the word for vow has three levels of restraint. So we're saying the Bodhisattva have the first level of restraint, obviously. Level of restraint, one-pointed concentration. It has a level of restraint that comes from understanding emptiness, without yet realized emptiness directly. And the Bodhisattva, a level of equanimity where he will not be agitated by the travails, of samsara. And here in this context, it's saying understanding emptiness is. All right, so I'm back. Page 70. One again. If it allows his or her mind to become overly upset by the unsatisfactory nature of samsara, okay? If one, by their, meditating on impermanence and suffering, without understanding of emptiness, that can move them to strong renunciation and a renunciation which would overcome their concern for others. Having such an attitude will very quickly bring about the complete extinction of samsaric rebirths. It means basically you give up the Bodhisattva ideal of the peace of nirvana. That's what it means. Buddha's nirvana is the non-abiding nirvana. It died in samsara, the extreme of samsara. It means not affected by samsara whatsoever. Not in the extreme of peace, which means the quiescent state of Hinana Nirvana. It means he doesn't fall into that state because it's not dynamic. It has no ability to affect the world. So, if the Bodhisattva were affected by concern about samsaric suffering, forget one out of here, then you fall into that extreme. Okay. that brings about the complete extinction of his or her samsara rebirths, in that way also fail to ripen the qualities of a Buddha in him or herself, fail to ripen other sentient beings, much less attain unsurpassed and complete enlightenment. So it goes on the same theme. The point is that emptiness, maybe let's end it on a positive note. So regarding this point, continuous rebirth, because the last paragraph, it probably goes, it has both of them. It has both. It summarizes the advantages of not having an understanding of emptiness. Regarding one, the continuous rebirth in samsara by a person whose mind is subject to the agitation of the mental afflictions because he or she does not understand something as it truly is. I mean, so continue agitated by samsara because you don't understand reality. There's that one fall. So you will be a bodhisattva at best. The swift extinction of samsara rebirth by a person whose mind has been upset by the unsatisfactory nature of samsara. You're overwhelmed by the feeling of the unbearable nature of existence, and so you want to complete the accumulations that are necessary to attain the nirvana, that nirvana, Buddha's nirvana, by whose mind has become frightened. That's another point. Let me read. The failure to complete the accumulations. The swing of complete extinction of samsara rebirths by a person who abides too frequently in the attitude of wanting to attain nirvana should be understood as elements of sattvas. Another point is it's a notion about Buddha's self that sophisticated person. You can be a bodhisattva and still have a strong sense of regarding yourself as a real person. And so one way to think about nirvana is that nirvana is a place where self no longer exists. So conceptually, is a sense of ego, the idea of seeing a state in which that ego no longer exists shouldn't appear. So I'm saying, to complete accumulations that are necessary to attain nirvana by a person, mind has become frightened by nirvana. The frightening, I'm saying, the idea that I don't want to go to a place where I'm no longer existing, so to speak. Just to digress briefly, there are three, in the pre-Arya state, there are three mental afflictions that are considered the principal obstacles seeking to gain that to acquire status. And again, one is doubt. You don't understand the nature of samsara and its suffering nature. You don't understand the truth of suffering involves an understanding of selflessness. There are four aspects to the suffering: impermanence, void, meaning there's the five skandhas are void of any separate ego, and then selflessness, which is that the five skandhas themselves exist without any accompanying agent that is existent. So then, not being what that means. represents a form of doubt. Okay, doubt is one of the 6 root mental afflictions. Doubt, it's not any kind of doubt. In theology, Buddhist theology, there are various kinds of doubt. One doubt is, what kind of doubt is not okay? The doubt which is pensive about the reality that Buddhist teaching presents and sort of shrinks away from it. Oh, but there's no self. I don't want to go there. I don't want to think about the idea that I don't exist. Doubt is into the path. So that's Tedzom, doubt. Nyongjen means afflicted doubt. Doubt is, oh, things are not self-existent? Wow, that's amazing. I wonder what it means. That kind of doubt. Which is sure what it means, but you don't to it. Right? Doubt is not mental affliction. Uncertainty, that possibility that you might enter further the meaning. But anyway, doubt. Then one of them is so among the views, this is that people would hear about. So Shila, Vrata, Parasha. Shila means conduct. It's the same for morality, but the word Shila has a neutral sense of also conduct. Any kind of conduct is Shila. But moral conduct also referred to the same term, Shila. Vrata means ascetic practices. So what you do that is sort of kind of intense, kind of physical or some kind of devotion to some kind of lifestyle that's rigorous. That is asceticism. Okay? So certain conduct that do not to the path and the goal which might undertake, or kind of more extreme form of practice, diet, for instance, or full exercise. To think that diet and physical exercise are the thing, and almost obsessive about it, and from perspective, too much of your concern with it promotes spiritual development. The idea being not meaning you should do things, it's okay to do things that are harmful to your physical being. It means don't think that alone is, panacea for life's troubles. And that's essential to your spiritual development. A week. Nothing with physical exercise. I'd say whatever. Then comes the idea that that's essential. The idea that has to that's central to your own quality of life, so to speak. That's considered a mental affliction, root mental affliction, and it leads astray. It involves you in doing things that really, in the long run, don't hate your spiritual development. And the third one is the technical term for belief in a real self. Jigdzogla Dao. Dao means the view that is focused on the principal assemblage. Principal assemblage is a synonym for the 5 skandhas. So 5 skandhas, and in relation to our 5 skandhas, we developed the notion that there really is some agent that is controlling. There is me here who is running the in the extreme, those three things are the primary obstacle to seeking or seeking jhana even. Because doubt kind of retracts. You can't because you don't know what to do. Misguided behavior leads astray. And self and seek nirvana because you're quite happy with your idea of yourself. So this line is saying, the failure to complete the accumulations that are necessary to attain nirvana by a person whose mind has become frightened by it. That was, I took that time. But the swift attainment of the complete extinction of samsara by a person who abides too frequently in the attitude of wanting to attain nirvana should be understood as elements of a bodhisattva's lack of effective means. If you're subject to those kinds of, mandates, you will not be a model bodhisattva. In regard to the pursuit of unsurpassed true and complete enlightenment. On the other hand, the continuous rebirth in samsara by a person whose mind is not subject to the mental afflictions because he or she does understand samsara as it truly is. The avoidance of a swift extinction of rebirth by a person whose mind has not been overly upset by the unsatisfactory nature of samsara. You can tolerate suffering for the higher path. All things either. I mean, easy to roll off the tongue, but to actually have that kind of dedication and conviction, that's one. Sincerity, getting morning, and that being your guiding, principle that you live by, and you really mean it. That's not. The will complete the accumulations that are necessary to attain that nirvana, by whose mind has not become frightened by that nirvana. I mean, I have to accumulate that much merit, I have to do that much knowledge, it's going to take me that much time. Are you willing? Are you willing to? It seems like perpetuity. Seek enlightenment. This other path gets you there faster. And then the avoidance of a swift extinction of samsara rebirth by a person who does recognize the benefits and good qualities of nirvana, right? But does not long for it excessively. Of a bodhisattva's great means for the attainment of unsurpassed true and complete. This is the notion that understanding of emptiness will avoid those, error attitudes. Which it's not. It's not to condemn for the sake of condemning. It's saying you cannot help it if you do not understand emptiness. You will be this person who cannot withstand the bad of samsara. You will get angry. You will develop attachment. You will work forever. Hope.
I'm sorry, I just about this. There's a verse in Ornamentalizations, it's in verse 18, introductory verse. It says, not abiding in existence through knowledge, not abiding in peace through compassion.
Yeah.
Disconfusing non-means not this.
Yeah.
So that's what we're talking about here.
Not really. Because, that's a very, it's not related, but this is focusing mainly on, that point of, did you inner science?
I only once, and it was a couple
Okay.
years ago. I didn't read it once.
I thought very verse, and give you get subject, write commentary on that verse. got only compassion, which keeps you from, peace, right? Then, actually, it's an interpretation that he gives. There are three components. One is compassion, one is analysis of the person, and the understanding of emptiness. This is right now, because I'm talking about this text, but there are three knowledges in the Bodhisattva Sutta. One is the knowledge that a Buddha has, concept of knowledge. Knowledge that Bodhisattva Aryas have as cultivated. Aryas. The knowledge which is the same class that Hinayanist, which is this Four Noble Truths. But I was talking about, he has knowledge of the Four Noble Truths, which is that third class of knowledge. But he or she adds to that compassion. He adds to that an understanding of emptiness. So that makes that third knowledge, form of knowledge, as similar to the way the Hinayanists practice it. So that's Shishe. It's knowledge of everything, because it means all ordinary phenomena. And then Dri means the mother. Paramita. The form of mother means Buddha's Paramita, means Buddha's Dharmakaya. So that all-encompassing knowledge, which is close to and all-encompassing knowledge which is far from the mother. So the knowledge that the Hinayanist have far from the mother. Because to Hinayana Nirvana, before they ever Mahayana path. Bodhisattvas have the same knowledge of six aspects for noble truth, but it's accompanied by compassion and happiness, then close to, takes them. It's very in conformity with achieving enlightenment. Way is the saying this.
That
but
becomes the of emptiness sort of
well, here,
like the thoughts and experiences that happen are sort of self-liberating, so that they're not because you're understanding emptiness, the afflictions never have a chance to take root.
That's the point. Yeah. Okay. All right. So that's chapter, the fourth chapter. I want to make that clock ticks. Okay. So then, let's see. Chapter 4. Chapter 5 is the powers. I told you it's about like supernatural abilities that you can gain. And then those are a mention towards the end. The first part are actual six. There's 6 kinds of supernatural powers, all of which first 5, and are very tools of aid for a bodhisattva. So I make light of them. I mean, these are qualities that are, right, to say the least. Then at the end, it talks about the powers of the 6 paramitas, and it says, what way are each paramitas a power? I mean, they have some kind of force or good, and addresses that. That's part of the same chapter. And then there's a really interesting the nature of a Buddha and sort of this miraculous acts of Buddhahood where the natural sort of is affected by his being. Anyway, I read that. Then there's the chapter on ripening is 6. There's in the chapter on ripening. I'm read out of time, I want to say something about morality. There's, let's see. Yeah, on page 145, and 1 through 153 almost, is a discussion of 27 kind of categories of ripening others. So these are sort of spiritual training and spiritual learning that about spiritual ripening. It's a very interesting discussion. So I do take a look at that. So if you were an adept yourself, if you were proficient yourself, these are the kind of principles that you would apply to others in order to hasten their spiritual ripening, essentially. So it's a very comprehensive range of topics. They could be mostly, the language might be you think about it, but give it a okay. For enlightenment is it's a rather short discussion of the nature of enlightenment is, what is Buddhahood, and then there's this discussion of Tathagata's good qualities. That actually is a very formulaic discussion of what is referred to as a recollection of the Buddha. So the Buddha is a Tathagata Arahat Samyak Sambuddha, teacher of gods and men, able to tame those who are capable of being tamed. It discusses those. Here's one here. I gave a lot of thought to this, and I really want to get into it here, which is there is this element, I mentioned it in the introduction too, where there is this thing which says seems sexist. It says no woman will achieve enlightenment, and that's sounds today's society and today's mindset. I think it's to a large degree explained. It needs to be what is meant by these kinds of statements. I make one or two observations. I don't really want to get into it. There are people, if you want to Google this kind of subject, gender in Buddhism, you'll find people who have written about this. I agree with everything they say. I put it down as dogma, and I would describe it this way. Okay, and it is Mahayanistic too, which is what's kind of interesting because you don't really hear this Buddhism about no woman will become an arhat. You never hear that because there are women arhats. What does it mean when they say the woman does not become a Buddha? Well, the one thing that it means, and this is even in Hinayana literature, it does at a certain point. The Bodhisattva. This is in Hinayana canonical literature. It says at a certain point when Bodhisattva, one begins to carry out the deeds that create the marks of the physical marks of a Buddha, the 32 major marks, the 80 minor marks. It happens that one of the major marks is a male sexual feature. So whether that has anything to do with it or not, I don't know. However, Bodhisattva is trying to, is creating the karma to achieve those marks. He no longer is born as a woman and born as a man. So this is the dogma, so to say.
What is that word you said?
Dogma. So G-M-A. And there's a corollary of that. The corollary of that is also in this book. The Bodhisattva path. I don't know. I'm not sure if it's because the fact that the Bodhisattva path is thought of in terms of countless lifetimes, versus being able to achieve nirvana within number of lifetimes. Well, that has nothing to do with it. Then part of that dogma is it would be preferable for a bodhisattva to be reborn as a male and to in that way. So that point is made in this text. I'm not asking you to espouse that. The truth of the matter is that I think that in a certain day that was put out there, that women were expected to witness and say, okay, in my life I'd rather be a man, continue my spiritual path as a man. That is in fact what this kind of sort of suggests. I think that the reality is that in today's world, especially in Tibetan Buddhism, I've never heard any Lama ever really try to propose that women should adapt to that. And I certainly don't suggest that. Just apparently, I'm involved in another translation project, which it's a tantric project, and one of recently was on is relevant to what I'm particular part of a ritual is it uses this term, the human being born who is the 6 substances, unique person who practiced the path unpassed yoga tantra. And the gods, not even the deities of the realm, capable of practicing because they don't have a body, they don't have a physical body which has the chakras and the nadis and as the so-called white and red bodhicitta and so on. So it's both in Tsongkhapa, in principal disciples Kedrupje, sort of in passing in this topic, he goes out of his way to identify passages in the Guhya Samaja Tantra where he says this applies equally to women. So not just men who have these, a womb-born physical body, but it's really true. Women, they have their, carving form of a physical body, which has the same potential to it. And consequently, it should be understood that women are able to practice, unsurpassed yoga tantra with consort. We're talking about unique kinds of practices and achieve enlightenment within a lifetime. That's my position. That's the view that I think is appropriate. And there's also there is a notion. This is I gave a lot of thought to this. I wasn't sure how to even address this. First, in the Mahayana Sutra Alankara, which in a chapter which says to solidity of the Mahayana doctrine and the Mahayana path. Don't forget, some circles Mahayanists view as not the teaching of the Buddha. So this is a chapter in the Mahayana Sutra Alankara where there's the goal is to substantiate that the Mahayana path is the way of the Buddha. And there is a verse. And I think I have give me a second. You're okay if we go a few seconds over 12? Okay. Let's see. I think it's come very end. So this is a verse. This is kind of the closing verses, and it's saying. I mentioned yesterday the Lamrim has 4 qualities of greatness. One, I mentioned the one that was all the Buddha's word will be seen as instruction, personal instruction. The last of the 4 is that the serious faults will naturally as the serious faults, the tendency is called rejecting Dharma. Rejecting Dharma is a subtle. I mean, of course, you say, "Oh, it's a bunch of baloney." That's obviously rejection of Dharma. There are lots of things in between. So selectively and say, "Oh, part of the teaching, I don't like that part of the teaching. I'm this. That doesn't matter to me." In a subtle way, that is, sort of vowing or, showing disregard for some aspect of teaching. That is considered a huge form of bad karma that will, in the future, can serve to you from meeting with the Dharma again. So this is kind of the doctrinal way of addressing this point. Then the most severe form is from the to have a view towards the Mahayana Dharma. Tekbomboa is to reject the Mahayana Dharma. So at the end of this chapter, which is meant to substantiate the Mahayana, he's saying, beware, don't develop hostile attitude towards Mahayana. So he says, it's a nice verse for a reason. So here's what he says. By mind, he means anger. Okay, a mind is any form of misdeed. So there are 2 kinds of misdeeds, right? The misdeeds that have anything to do with the vows whatsoever. If you have mental afflictions and you act on them, natural misdeed. If the vow not to take lives or take what was given, and then you precept. Then you've not only committed a natural misdeed, but you've also violated a prescribed, kind of transaction which the Buddha gave. For instance, some of them are not innately wrong even. So, for instance, the monks are not supposed to eat food after midday. They're not supposed to, use fire, things like that. So, I mean, nothing inherently immoral about those acts. Guide them for a particular reason. So therefore, if you broke those violations, those would not be a violation of any natural immorality. They would only be a violation of some prescribed precept. So he's saying a mind, in the most general way, is a form of natural need, a natural fault. And it's a very Mahayana statement. It says, and then it's poetic too. So it says unsuitable. It uses unsuitable twice. It says it's unsuitable to have a hostile mind. Even someone who has an unsuitable form. This is literally what it says. What that means is who has an unsuitable form is a phrase that means someone is your antagonist. Some sight of upsets you because they are a threat or whatever. So from a Mahayana point of view, you be even to a person. And what are you getting angry at anyway? You're getting angry at what you see, a physical form. There is, there's no person there. You're just getting angry at physical form to have some, mental about. So saying, if that is true, if you should become hostile even towards someone you consider enemy, to say you should become hostile towards a form of dharma about which you are unsure. So this is something that Tsongkhapa raises a number of times. It says, it would be better to develop a neutral mind towards it. It doesn't have to accept it. The Buddha never said, you have to believe everything I taught. If you believe what I taught, if it seems to you proper, then, Dharma says this all the time. You can, read it. If you don't want to, nobody's making you do it. But he's saying, there are certain elements of Mahayana, and I'm not saying necessarily this particular point that I raised, but I draw this point with it. It's not only in relation to this. There are other examples that elements of the Dharma which are not literal, not to be taken literal, and are just puzzling. So the saying is, there are some elements of the Dharma which are inscrutable. The case for you, and you don't understand them, you don't appreciate what their point is. Again, I don't mean this point. Then, rather than saying, rejecting it, then instead, be neutral. Say, I know what this means. I don't know what the significance of this is. Therefore, it would be better just to be neutral about it. Why? Because if you remain neutral about it, you will be free of any wrongdoing. So anyway, I agree with that explanation at that point. I promised you that we would get to that chapter, so I want to. So now, this is the last thing we have any time for. The big chapter in the book, and even the most important chapter in the book, is morality, topic of morality. So this is chapter 10. A lot that I wanted to cover, but I just apologize if we didn't. So each of the 6 paramitas and even the other 4 kinds of way of gathering a following, he mentions here, you see in the opening of the chapter, there are these summary verses. And there are the 9 categories in relation to morality. So the essence of morality, the all-inclusive form of morality, the morality difficult to carry out, the morality directed everywhere, and so on. There are 9 sort of categories. And this is true for each of the paramitas. So there's the essence of generosity, there's the essence of patience, there's all-inclusive form. So it's a very important framework that Asanga divides. And at the end of chapter 14, I think it is, he tells you, he says, well, how does this form of morality promote this aspect of Buddhahood? So it's a very sort of correspondence between these elements of each of these practices and, the ultimate goal. And so I just point that out. So here, Tsongkhapa wrote a commentary on Buddhist morality, which is essentially based on this chapter. To it, I just mentioned, so you know, also elements from the Samachaya, which is Shantideva's text that I mentioned the other day, and combines the two. So, for instance, in the Bodhisattva vows on the Gelugpa school, there are 18 root transgressions and 46 secondary deeds. Among 18, only 4 of them are mentioned in this text. The 14 come from the Akashagarbha Sutra, which is quoted by Shantideva in this text. The Akashagarbha Sutra, I noticed, itself is included in this project to translate the Gangtengri, the 84,000 Dharma, and have a translation of this sutra. Kashagarbha is the name of a bodhisattva. So if you're interested, you can read that. Sutra. I think it's some kind of a digital library. Over here it says, I'll go through some of this. I'll try not to keep you too long because I sit for hours and I'm comfortable. I lose sight of the fact that, at some point you might be feeling uncomfortable. I'm sorry. I'll try to keep it very short. Okay, essence of morality. What is the essence of morality? It is very important, so I'll just try to cover it a little bit. It's the essence of Bodhisattva's morality possesses 4 qualities. What are the 4? They are, 1, to accept the morality correctly from another person. That means who you vows from. He uses the adverb correctly for a very specific reason. Certainly in Tibetan Buddhism, people, the monks and serious practitioners, take very careful who they take vows from. They don't vows from anybody and everybody. So you hear that someone's giving this vow or that vow or the other vow, doesn't necessarily mean that's the best place, the best person from whom to take a vow. So, for instance, when people become take the ordained vows of a monk, they try to take it for the highest lama available. But if not the lama, then someone who's the Ganden Buddha, for instance. It's a big deal, and it is because they believe that the degree to which the person conferring the vows lives to the vows, that something of him or her is transmitted to you, and it will contribute to your ability to maintain morality. So that's a deal. So that's an element. And Asanga discusses who to take from. It doesn't, not enough that the person be knowledgeable. It has to be a person who is pure in his or her morality. See that. Number 2, to do extremely pure attitude. So that's saying you should have as much as possible. Let's say, Gordon said, even if you don't have the natural form, the uncontrived form of bodhicitta, you should, especially while you're taking the vows, you develop a strong form of contrived bodhicitta. Contrived bodhicitta doesn't mean you're it means it's effort for you to muster the emotional quality of bodhicitta, but you have it to whatever degree you're able to elicit it. That's purity of attitude, number 2. Number 3, with vows, Buddha was aware that, in fact, he devised the vows, precisely, especially the inner vows, he devised them precisely to counteract individual instances of behavior that he determined to be inappropriate. And in fact, that's how the precepts for the monks' vows were, So the Buddha was quite aware of the fact that his vows were not fallible. So it's not expect you necessarily will be able to keep them in absolute purity. The idea is to try as much as you can to keep them as pure as you can. In the event that you have a lapse, hopefully a more lapse, then remedy it. In other words, do not leave it with tending to it. Tending to it is to remedy the transgression. The real transgression involves the ritual of confession. So there's a ritual of everyone that knows about Buddhism at all knows that the monks and nuns have a bi-monthly confession ritual that they are, if it's a rule, they should try to follow. A corresponding form of confession ritual for the vows. I think that is not pretty, even in the Tibetan community, it's not very not adhered to, maybe as one would hope, shall we say. For instance, my teacher in the tradition, Mahayana vows are Bodhisattva vows and Tantric vows. In the Tantric monastery, even only in the Tantric monasteries, they would have a certain time of year where they would, the word is sojong. Sojong is the Tibetan word for purification, ritual of confession. So the Tantra monasteries, they call something called Great Sojong, Sojong Chemo. At one time, they would not only confess monks' vows, but they would also do a confession ritual for the Bodhisattva vows and Tantric vows. And the Tantric and Bodhisattva vows kind of following the other. And my dear, I don't know anyone other who does that or has done that in the West. Unusual because in the case of the Tantric monasteries, we've done with ordained people and allowed lay people to attend the part of the confession that relate to the Buddha vows and Tantric vows. This is very unusual. Anyway, there is such a ritual. You can, and so the element of confession relating to the Bodhisattva vows is and I'll talk about it here in this text. Signs of transgressions require, according to Asanga, confessing before a minimum of 3 persons. They can even be inanimate. They can be monks, not bodhisattvas even, but you can confess to them. I don't believe that it has to be an ordained person. Presumably have to be, if it were a lay person, I would think a bodhisattva, someone who had the bodhisattva vows. So anyway, that's the area of bodhisattva morality. And then last one is develop a respect for remaining of transgressions. Whereas the idea is that even if you do commit transgressions, you should atone for them through confession. At the same time, you formulate the resolve and determination not to keep it. So the last one is to respect for remaining free of transgressions, abide in a state of recollection. The state of recollection means the word is recollection. One of the mental factors is smriti in Sanskrit, and it comes from a verb which means to remember. So I treat it as recollection. Someone in a review of the in science didn't like recollection. He thought recollection sounds like remember past, and it doesn't mean that. And it's true, it doesn't mean that. I can define recollection, in the come to do, so I don't have a problem with the word recollection. It's like, so remember this, keep it in your mind, right? And recollection in that sense. So recollection is a very important quality, is what holds some awareness, some understanding in the forefront of your conscious mind. That's its function in Dharma practice. You have to do something to cultivate a kind of spiritual awareness, and then cultivate it. The function of recollection is to kind of keep it there as long as you can. Try not to have it fade away completely. And then, of course, practicing morality, recollection is certainly applicable to being mindful of to not allow yourself to cultivate. Okay, so 4 main points. So the rest of this section, this is the of morality, is talking about them, and it's not so difficult. We get to all-inclusive morality, the second section. All-inclusive morality is the one. This is the big part. This is the longest chapter in the book, by the way. And this section, all-inclusive morality, is the bulk of the chapter. And all-inclusive morality means 3 kinds of morality. First of all, it says that there's 2 kinds of morality. There's 2 kinds of bodhisattva morality. Bodhisattva morality practiced by householders and the Bodhisattva practiced by ordained people. So two, right? It says that first. Those who have fourth means ordained persons, or householders. Nothing. One way of all-inclusive. See, one of the things is that it opens up Bodhisattva morality to lay people. It then says both of those factions, the main categories of morality are three. The moral restraint, the moral of accumulating virtue, and the moral of acting on behalf of others, or acting to benefit others. So that description, that discussion is, a bulk of the Bodhisattva morality. So of morality of restraint. Now this is interesting because I don't know that all of you read this, but it suggests that a bodhisattva, layperson or ordained person, ought to take one or another of the forms of Longhinana vows. And so whether that be as a fully ordained monk or nun, or it can be a lay person. Usually the lay person's vows are 5 precepts: killing, stealing, misconduct, alcohol, lying. Those 5 precepts. There are others, actually. You can not to give up alcohol. You can take, okay, I take the person's vow, only 4 precepts. So, discussion about taking layperson's vows. There's also a way of being a layperson celibate. You can take 8 precepts. But the main one is those 5 precepts. If those only be taken from another ordained person, fully ordained monk or so. You don't have to take them before you take the Bodhisattva vows. You can take them afterwards. I think you're generally like to do that, though. He would give people the layperson vows, if they took the Bodhisattva vows. Usually he gave them an initiation. But there were times he would not give. If he already gave the person Bodhisattva vows, then he was willing to give them the layperson's vows, which frustrated some students. But I don't believe, I don't know, you can check, but I believe that if you do the Bodhisattva vows, that, or without having taken the person's vows, it excludes you from doing so. I don't believe it does. It's something to confirm yourself if you want to know. And so morality of restraint ideally means that you keep one form of Hinayana morality. And there's a reason for that. If you look in the Lamrim, it talks about, in the section on morality, it talks, Bongaren, it talks about it. It's a very interesting subject. He says, he talks about, well, people are afraid of taking vows. Because, for me to keep those vows, or I don't keep those vows, or there's so many vows, I'm sure I'll break some of the vows, so I'd be better off not taking the vows. So that's that point. And saying the difference being a person who has taken vows or a person who has never taken vows, very big. Why? Because when you take the vows, you take vows in an unqualified way. I'm not going to take life. You say, I'm not going to take any life. I'm not going to take the life of a bug. I'm not going to take the life of a horse, much less that of a human or something. It is without exception. I think the idea of not taking life, that's a good thing. I like that idea. I might try to follow that principle. But it's not make the commitment, the conviction with vigor and with strength of will to say, we'll never, under any circumstances, take a life of any kind. That's an act. That is the vow. And it's meant to be done with the mind, which is enough, so that if the occasion presents itself where the thought of taking another life might present itself to you, that vow will be strongly enough embedded in your conscious or subconscious mind that you allow yourself to do it. That's the essence of what vow means. That's why I translate it as restraint. It means the mental, will to not act on otherwise be an impulse. So do that formally in front of, ordained preceptor. That's supposed to be a virtual act, which produces huge virtue. Huge. So if you generate that vow continues to accumulate virtue. You thinking about it or not, you have made that, the result. So it's a small thing. Okay. Now, that's not only to Hinayana but also to Mahayana right? Principle is true. There's a whole the vow actually consists of. Abhidharma is physical in nature, some kind of subtle form that pervades your being. Mahayanas don't accept that. They say that it is a non-physical thing, but something which does in fact alter your being, and which is enables you to preserve the moral code. Okay, the quality of acquiring virtuous qualities is essentially everything that's in the Bodhisattva Bhumi, and try to practice as much as you can to right your own mind. Mm-hmm. So the quality of writing yourself as a way of fulfilling the things that relate to you, that's, really the mode of acquiring virtuous qualities. And as a Bodhisattva, you're doing it ultimately with the aim of wanting to benefit others, but essentially activities that acute virtue for you. Not only merit, but wisdom as well. So the description here is fairly straightforward. Next one, something that doesn't often get deep to here, so I want to talk about it a little bit. Called the modality that acts on behalf of being. This category is in fact a type of activities that are classified into 11 categories of directly to benefit others. And we can read section on page 43. So this is to assist beings. Assist beings is the essence of the first act. And that by the way, there's a hierarchy to this. It's out from the most simple and basic way of benefiting others. So assisting beings is almost like being a Boy Scout or a Girl Scout, right? People in very mundane ways. Whatever they're doing that they have trouble doing on their own, you help them. Make it easier for them. Assisting beings. Who says then the second kind of so it says any variety of meaningful activities. It says okay, especially things that they want to do that you think are good for them as well, and then you help them sort of to accomplish. Then B, also under the that's 1A. 1B is assisting other kinds of beings, particular beings who want to help themselves because of some misfortune. If they're ill, for instance. So, visiting, sick people and to help them in their sickness. Or, people that are disabled, people that cannot take care of themselves. Discussed further here. You can read those. So that's a way of assisting beings. Then this category is for instruction in the form of teaching Dharma, teaching methods that relate to mundane and transcendent aims. Mundane means, as a Bodhisattva, one of the things that you can do is you can help people with their livelihoods, right? That's only Dharma. So it's a way for a person to, make some kind of, integrity in their life, and to the degree that they're successful, maybe it gives them the leisure to then pursue the Dharma if they're so inclined. Way of teaching what's proper, you have some particular knowledge or skill about a vocation, you can impart that, assuming it's a morally acceptable kind of vocation. It can be mundane. Transcendent goes without saying. Now, there's a word in Buddhism, very word called Bhumi. Bhumi is the opposite of mindfulness. It means, it's the Sanskrit word for it, pramada. Pramada is from the root, which means literally mad. It means a person who is heedless. It means a person who does the first thing that comes into their mind, consider the consequences of their actions. A person who just is out of control. That kind of person is not likely to be a very moral person. So that's the opposite side of that is so the avoid of that kind of is what is called mindfulness, usually translated as mindfulness. It's one of the 11 categories of virtues. It's really a particular mental state, per se individual mental state. The mental state, it's a combination of factors. When you cultivate them, about quality of heedfulness and being aware of what's going on around you, and being of a calm demeanor, and having clarity, and being able to think of what's appropriate to do, and then act accordingly. So it's defined as a state of mind in which you are constantly on guard to protect from non-virtuous states. When that is appropriate. So if you're in a situation where you might develop non-states of mind, then to be prepared and ready to, keep up from letting go. The other side is, you're not in danger of developing mental illness, you're in really calm and unthreatening situation. You shouldn't just sit there idly. You should be consciously trying to cultivate virtues of mind. So those to get mindful. Then that's a subject to do that. But so here of giving instruction in a context is largely who do not cultivate mindfulness. To those whom you recognize to be acting in a way that's harmful to them. And then the idea is that you this is tough because it's not always appropriate. If you want and you know what's good for that person, doesn't mean necessarily you should open your mouth and tell them. I think you're the one who told that story, right? You want to your friend something about the car, 3 ladies or something.
I did.
Yeah.
Are you talking about
Yes.
that?
Yeah.
I did tell us. I have a lot of stories.
Yeah. So I'm saying abiding by this principle is not, it's not good. I have an expression, Dharma police. Huh? We shouldn't be the Dharma police. Huh? We don't always, even if we think we know what's right for that person, it's not on us necessarily to inform them of that. You guys are always said, be your police. At least your own mind. There are occasions when it is appropriate. It might, in in fact not be, badly received. In that case, then you should try to, make who is not mindful mindful. You can't. The challenge of Bodhisattva activities of benefiting others is developing ability to know when to do so, and if it has to be an appropriate time, how to do so. So that's, it doesn't always fill in all those blanks, but second category. And third one, undertaking to return a favor in a suitable manner as a way of showing gratitude toward beings who helped you. This thing that you have gotten from somebody else. You're obligated to return whatever gratitude you received or greater than what you received. And that definitely applies to the teacher. There's no such thing as, I'll be your student, and when everything that I need from you as your student, then, okay, we're done. Nothing. That can be repaid. But anyway, the kind you do get from others should never be forgotten. Then 4, protect beings from various sources of danger, such as, and this is the 8 fears, right, in the world are the 4 elements, and then such like tigers. This is danger in the environment. King is being in danger of the law come down on you. Birds, obviously, there are other human beings there who are not your friends. And water and fire are environmental dangers, things like that. So you're, as a bodhisattva, on the lookout to protect people from those perils. In fact, that's considered a form of generosity, practicing generosity. That is giving. In Tibetan, it says jimijikpa, means absence of fear. It doesn't really mean absence of fear. It means actually means protection. So that's generosity. Fearful mind to have to live under. We can, fear in others. So, bodhisattva activity. Number 5, dispel grief of misfortune. So that means people who, their wealth is, lost or something. And obviously, when people in those circumstances, it's difficult. So the mental, torment that they experience in that time, if you do anything to assuage that, it's, as well, the grief of loss, family loss, whatever, parents, spouse, child, and that also mentioned. So that's 1. Just Number 6, providing in a proper manner all those objects that are means of subsistence to beings who are in need of objects that are means of subsistence. That's a very interesting range of things, and that's talking about anything and everything. It means, you have, in the West, we have this, especially, it's become very sort of prevalent notion in the West. I remember people saying the charity per se is not good, that it would be better to give people the means to, help themselves, or something. That just, which is, even make people think. But I mean, I've heard, people, in pub saying things like that. There's a thing to that idea, but I don't abide by it in any way wholesale. And I find anything wrong with practicing charity, because the practice of generosity as a practice for you as it is for the person that you're giving to. That it is suggesting that the Bodhisattva at a level might in fact have the opportunity to acquire large amounts of wealth, and that if one has that ability, that one ought to in fact pursue that wealth and use that wealth. So remaining in a state of poverty and a religious person, I'm not saying categorically in all cases would be wrong. There's this idea, which is to say, certainly in the Sutrayana context, that there's an act of generosity and helping others is highly appropriate to amass as much wealth as possible for helping those who are in need and making it possible for their lives to be less difficult. That's meant in a sense of just large people that you don't necessarily have any connection with. It especially applies to those who are your students, your spiritual followers, for instance. That the Grappas that comes here, it says, okay? First would say provide whatever makes people's lives comfortable. Number 7, lead body of practitioners. Now we're getting from the mundane to just in the realm of Dharma. Now, if a Dharma teacher, and you should in fact try to attract a following of students to impart the Mahayana Dharma to them. And here this is saying, as you do that, you should provide them with all the resources necessary for them to be able to do so. So it's actually like to create a physical environment where they can come and live, and then provide them with whatever means of subsistence while them for the Dharma. That's the deal, with a teacher would do that. Number 8 is receiving food, drink, and the like from others by approaching them at appropriate times and conversing with them, chatting with them, pleasing them, engaging in orderly discourse with others regarding worldly affairs, going in response to invitations from others. In short, acting in a way that complies with the minds of others, while avoiding all forms of unattractive and wrongful behavior. That's full, and it covers a huge range of things. We talked about later. Well, you're not such a, you're not, have unlimited resources. You could go out and, in fact, do fundraising, so to speak, for your gathering of students. So that's giving food and drink from others, approaching them at appropriate times. It means like cultivating benefactors, in fact, that kind of thing. That's one. Then it says also, then it switches. So all of this is included in this number 8, which is called complying with the minds of others. We're talking about, it's very wide-ranging. It's accounting for engaging others, being willing to engage others. Normally, there's a word in the Abhidharma. There's something called samsarga. Samsarga means contact, literally. Considered one of the 6 causes for generating the mental afflictions. And consequently, if you want to avoid generating the mental afflictions, one of the best or one of the easiest ways to do that is to sequester yourself from society and go to a solitary life, peace, and quiet. In the convention of Buddhism, they very viable and appropriate thing to do. For Buddha, you don't have that luxury. So saying, on behalf of your own followers, you may have to go out and be with other people, or just in coming in contact with people. You may, in fact, be in where it says receive food and drink and the like. There's one of the vows is invited. If you're invited to go to some person's house, you better if you refuse it. If you're invited, you're supposed to accept. One of the transgressions of Bodhisattva Bhumi is if you're invited to do something and then you don't accept it. Basically, it's an opportunity to engage. And so it's inviting you, someone wants to, a meal or whatever it is. I mean, they're looking at it. One is if you're a teacher or you're a real spiritual person and they'll honor you or something by inviting you. All the more reason that you ought to go. But your friends, it's express their goodwill towards you by inviting you, then you ought to accept, other things being equal. So and then it says, okay, well, you accept. Then it says, well, in their company, you're not going to just sit there and, act like, see nothing, you're not going to say nothing. You can't. You have to talk, you have to be pleasant. So, when you engage people, it's because you want to have some conversation. So you have to be willing to have ordinary conversation with them. Conversation which you have no desire necessarily to engage in, but out of politeness. You're willing to and hold up your end of the conversation. You do not become not lose mindfulness. You have to know, like, it's okay when you've sort of done your obligation, and then you can say, okay, sorry, go home now. Something like that. Saying there is this thing, so comes chatting and pleasing them. Okay, saying, it's not flattery. You're not being, a hypocrite if you make an effort to be pleasant. You do it because you like the person. And so you look at the person and you don't say side snarky things. You say, you talk about something in your mind, you understand, if you heard, probably they would act positively. That kind of way to approach, conversation. Cynicism is to be sarcasm, even sarcasm of cynicism. The Buddha actually, in a way, is very Pollyanna-ish. Surely act Pollyanna-ish, but in your mind, always positive. Oh, no matter what. For we Westerners, the more educated we are, we have a tendency, whatever, I self of me. So, but the ideal is always, look at a person and, feeding them and basically kind of saying things that will, be other kind of. So that comes down to this, it says, engaging in orderly discourse with others regarding worldly affairs. It means you can talk about, ordinary, things that are going on, just, do it in a discreet way, do it in a way that doesn't, lead to arguments or whatever. And it says, coming and going in response to invitations, and this is what it says, acting in a way that complies with the minds of others. There was someone recently, last time I was here, who asked me about this, and I talked The Sheng Sem Sun. The phrase is to be protective of the other person's mind. You know how your behavior, what kind of reaction your behavior could, prompt in the other person. If you're, at all, aware of how people act and think. And with that, you see something in the, it relates before to that point about giving people advice. You see a fault in the person, say. You necessarily comply with that person. You're not necessarily helping that person if you got that fault. I mean, they're receptive to it. That's another story. But either the fault in the other person, and better off without that fault. So, let me confront them with it. Not necessarily do that. But it's not aware of the fault necessarily. Aware of the fault. Choose to be compliant with the person. That means that will not cause the other person to be defensive or to feel that he or she's being threatened by you or that you're in any way. That's an interesting mindset to sort of carry and try to cultivate. And it's the principle of complying with the minds of others. And you condone. You look for a benign way, if there's one, to perhaps influence the other person. Way, you don't necessarily, if you want to try to help the person and they fall and you want to try to help them overcome it, you don't necessarily bring that up in the first time that you meet them. Right? You call some kind of relationship with the person, and somewhere down the line is more, appropriate or suitable. I'm on. I just want to finish this.
I have a borrowed car.
I didn't mean to. Not necessary. Yeah. Okay. Take care. So that's that's something that Westerners, people that I know, it's not something that people are aware of. So I want to emphasize it. It's a quality. It's a good quality, and it's not easy to cultivate. Okay, that's 8. The form of 8 is complying with the minds of others in a number of different contexts. It says, give to others by their good qualities. Again, it's not flattering. It's if a Dharma person makes some progress and develops some kind of good quality, then by note of it, you're, so you ought to do it. And it's in 2 ways. It can be done in public, it can be done in private. Okay. It's in private or open. It causes problems by, talking about it to other people get jealous or whatever. Then don't do it. But, it'd be beneficial to do it in a public setting, do it. It'd be beneficial to do it in a private setting, do it. There's a side to that. Then the other is, and I remember my own teacher used to tell me, if you and then they become proud, then good. So these are very kind of dynamics. But in principle, it's good to encourage someone based on their accomplishments. It's an activity. Number 10 and number 11, the last 2 are really kind of everyone. So it says acts of suppression in the form of a reprimand, the imposition of a punishment or banishment, with inwardly affectionate and holds a superior attitude of wanting to benefit those who are involved, and doing so for the express purpose of turning them away from opportunities to engage in this is formulaic, from opportunities to engage in unvirtuous actions and establishing them in opportunities to engage in virtuous actions. This is in a social, in an institutional setting where people if they become a problem, then it's a duty of the person who is sort of in charge, if that happens to be you, to reprimand. So there are three kind of levels that are talked about. One is if the person can be corrected and they would accept it, to do, to present them with faults that they've committed, not to necessarily do it in conflict, but that you bring it to their attention and, tell them, you should cease this. And with the intention or with the understanding that it would be complied with, and if appropriate. Other kinds require more than just a reprimand. There are in the Vietnam there are rules for applying some kind of corrective punishment for people who deny it. So that comes into play here. And then in the worst case, if somebody is irritable and is creating a environment, have to be banished. So that's a heavy kind of activity to undertake. I've never seen anybody ever undertake it, but it's an element of Bodhisattva practice mentioned here. This one is also rather beyond most of us. It says, cause persons to recoil from virtue by using miraculous powers to directly reveal the migratory states of the hells and winning over pleasing and astonishing beings, so they will dedicate themselves to the Buddha's teaching. So there are examples of that one as well, but I don't think we have to worry about some other ones. So those are the 11 categories, and then having here just sort of laid them out, then there's a section which says, okay, now here's what it's like when you actually abide by that, and it says conduct is well restrained. It's a good example of Buddha Shakyamuni and how Buddha Shakyamuni, the lifestyle of a renunciate, has big time wealth and opulence. So that's an extreme and the ideal form of accepting form of morality of restraint. One, and then number two, acquiring virtue effectively. Talks about you're supposed to cultivate it's page 248. Saying, well, now this is how you go about cultivating that second kind of morality. And then on 249 it starts a little bit more elaborate description of those 11 categories of benefiting others, and it goes on for a number of pages. So I knew kind of the see of what those 11 categories are. This gives you a little bit more application of them. Goes into that. Okay, to page 260. Page 260 is a ritual for taking Bodhisattva vows. Very, very beautiful, very, very specific description of the ritual and what engages in it, how they behave, and how the person who gives it should behave, and so on. It's only about 5 pages, but it's really beautiful. 265 starts. Okay, now you're taking the Bodhisattva vows. Now you got to try to keep it. So page 265 says how to safeguard the discipline. The best way to safeguard the discipline is to know what it involves and to remind yourself of your intention to observe it and enforce that commitment. Okay, and then there it goes on page 267. These are 4 acts that represent an extreme form of defeat. So these are 4. Let's say there are 4 here. 4 root transgressions is complies, or it's analogous to the 4 expulsory offenses of the monk or nun. Unlike the vows, if you break your vows, they can be retaken. So 4 acts. Okay, so they're described here in a brief statement. Are we okay? Something we have to leave? Causing you undue pain? Okay. I promised Denise. So I'm going to try to go through some of this chapter. Don't feel I'm not offended if you leave. So what are the four? What are the four? These are root transcriptions. Himself and disparaging others by one who is attracted to gain and honor is an act that represents an extreme form of defeat for Bodhisattva. This is not necessary. It's okay. No. You give it to the center. Give it to the center.
I do.
Praising self and others. I mean, it's simple, very straightforward, big deal. Ego, monster, right? And it's all about that. So the idea of, the idea that, we want people to think we're somebody special. It's just a bad motivator, So that, and under no circumstance, that's not true. Under no circumstances, but most circumstances, don't promote self. And don't self as the other person. And really difficult. Being mental. It's like, what do you gossip about? You gossip about the stuff that people are doing that you disapprove of. It's simply saying, don't do it. If you allow yourself, that's saying about cynicism versus, trying to remain positive. The person is, sees things that are bad in the world and talks about it and enjoys talking about it. And that's not really appropriate. You see things that are bad, you have to dwell on it. You don't have to talk about it. So, and then it gives you something that we're going to get to is really important about trying to capture that impulse, shall we say. That's number one. But that's so simple. But and it's put there at the top of the list of the four. That doesn't really need much comment. The refusal to, so that was praising self and criticizing others. Second one, refusal to give material objects because of a greedy nature and hard-heartedness. Okay? People are needy. You could help them, but it's right. Petitioners who have approached in a correct manner. So it's not necessarily that you go out looking for places to practice generosity. If somebody comes to you with a request, you better have a good reason, why not to comply. And then, if you read the chapter on generosity, because it does in fact describe the do's and don'ts of practicing generosity. But here it's saying, refusal to give when you can. That is, violating the spirit of Bodhisattva. So, to petitioners who are approaching in a correct manner, especially those who are suffering, those who are miserable and impoverished, and those who lack a protector and somebody to rely upon. One has and possesses wealth. Then half of the generosity is the refusal to share Dharma teachings with those who seek them. So when people ask you for Dharma, everything else being equal, you're supposed to teach. But anyway, it's also there are exceptions. To refuse to teach because the idea being that you like the fact that people will consider you knowledgeable, and if you don't share it with another person, they will remain, less you in terms of knowledge, and that's part of your motivation. That's kind of the Dharma stinginess part of it. Because stinginess about the Dharma, that's what that means. Stinginess about the Dharma means that you value the fact that other people will regard you as knowledgeable about Dharma, and you will keep that position. And one of the ways to keep it is by not sharing the Dharma. It's what can you say? That's also bringing the vows, root transgression. Number two, those are the second one, One of the material things, and the second half of it is giving the Dharma. So, perturbation of anger. Perturbation is a funny word. It's a synonym for a mental affliction. Something agitates the mind is a perturbation. The perturbation of anger. So is absolutely, without exception, ever appropriate for a bodhisattva. You never can justify anger. There's nothing as righteous anger, but that's not right anger. The idea that you're all right, you're to never. It's discussed here as well. Okay, so it says the perturbation of anger can be of a kind. Now this is a particular kind of anger. You get so upset with another person. Well, it sort of builds in you. It becomes stronger and stronger, and then you can't let go of it. Come to an end merely by uttering harsh speech. It's not enough that you're angry. You shout at the person verbally. And its anger is so strong that it causes you to physically, to the person. A Buddha who has been overcome by such a form of anger may strike, harm, or cause injury to sentient beings with his or her hand, a clod of earth, a club or weapon. Get so angry that, not only do you scream and yell at the person, you actually throw something at them or hit them. If you find that yourself doing that, you're over in terms of Bodhisattva vows, right? More. So you've done that, or you haven't done that, but you're angry with somebody by having this attitude of anger in strong form. Even if you haven't acted on it, right? Else comes along. I know you're mad at me. I know I know that I've somehow, I've done. They know what they did that made you angry. Then they come to you and they say, "Sorry, I know I made you angry, and and they doesn't willing to accept your apology, refuse to accept or give an acknowledgement of wrongdoing made by others." I said, no. Always accept. Always forgive. So there are two levels of anger. One is what causes you to be aggressive physically, another person. The other one is a form of anger in which you're not willing to let go of somebody else's wrongdoing. Both of them are part of the third. Okay? This is an act of repentance, extreme form of defeat for Bodhisattva. Number 3. Number 4. Today we just talked about disparaging the Bodhisattva collection of scriptures. Under circumstances, do you have the right to choose in the Mahayana and say which part of the Mahayana you like or don't like? And that's one of it. Disparaging the Bodhisattva collection. Some part of it, this part of the Bodhisattva collection. You worry about that. Disparaging it. Or taking pleasure in teaching or establishing counterfeit forms of Dharma. That's a big one. And I have to say, in my life, not that I'm that old, but I've run the Dharma for a number of decades, and that this is among some people who have pursued the Dharma, then to kind of on the role of being a Dharma teacher and devising a form of Dharma which they think is appropriate to, suited to the times, or something to that effect. That can be what this is referring to, counterfeit Dharma. To pleasure in, take pleasure in means thinking that it's right, thinking that it's appropriate, thinking it's a good thing. Yeah, that's old-fashioned. The Dharma is old-fashioned. We have to teach it in a way that's, right for today's society, things like that. That's something to be very careful about. And that's my opinion. And also, if you see people who are form of Dharma that comes to that, I'd say, be wary. Okay, so those are the 4 ones that represent an extreme form of defeat. Extreme form of defeat here means if you commit these at a form that rises to the level of actual one of these acts, you destroy your Bodhisattva vows, and they're gone. So how do you determine that? Okay, so it says, moreover, a Bodhisattva does not lose the acceptance of the Bodhisattva system of moral discipline. Any of these 4 acts that represent an extreme form of defeat is done on the basis of a lesser or middling purpose, right? Where desire for gain and honor was the first perturbation, right? Then the second one was stinginess, right? Third one was anger, right? Fourth one has to be ignorance. Okay. Then it's now what is it that constitutes, violation of these 4 kinds of acts, but rise to the level of your vows. So, and lesser form of the mental involved is damaging in this way and needs to be confessed, but only if it's a great mental perturbation to destroy the vows. Okay, so what's a great perturbation? There are 4 qualities, okay? When the basis for committing any of these acts is such that a Bodhisattva does not develop even a small amount of shame and abashment, he or she has engaged continually in these 4 acts, that is an extreme form of defeat. So if you feel they commit anything, you don't think you did anything wrong by committing any of these 4 acts. And because you did anything wrong, you can do these things without giving a second thought, right? One of the factors that contributes to it. That's that. All right? So shame and abashment is the sense of that this is awful, an emotion. These are 2 very important moral impulses. They are also among the 11 virtuous attitudes, or a sense of shame. So I do that because it would be wrong. That's shame. Then, because of lacking that shame, you just continue to do it, without thought, and you just do it repeatedly. That's going to totally destroy your Bodhisattva vows. Secondly, do have shame, right? Because you don't think it's wrong form. You're both pleased with and delight in that conduct. That not only do you continue to engage in it, you approve of it. You're fine with it. You think, yeah, I should do that. It was a good thing to do. You think you're justified, right? And delight in that conduct. And then, if you look on that very conduct as a good quality, not only do you approve of it, you think highly of yourself for having carried it out. So if those 4 factors are present, then this should be understood as constituting a great perturbation. So all these are present. You're doing it all the time. You don't have any compunction about doing it. You approve of the fact that you did it, and you think that you're a better person for having it. Then, if you get any one of those 4, then you've destroyed Bodhisattva vows. In the footnote 753, I refer to Tsongkhapa's, just because I tell you what a lesser and middling is, or are missing, then great, but he talks about what's lesser and what's a middling, which is kind of the view in the Gelugpa school is based on his commentary to this chapter. The 4 things that would determine whether or not committing any of those acts is a root transgression. Committing a root transgression, by definition, destroys the vows. Okay. Secondary offenses. I'm going to call it quits. See, look what's already after one. Second offenses are 46 of them. This is a beautiful presentation because it describes 46 kinds of activities, and it gives you all kinds of qualifications and exceptions, and how to identify them. So this is not categorical. So, and it goes through 47. It's a really, really useful thing to go through and think about. So it goes on. These go on up to the first up 3. These deeds is called showing disrespect toward a Dharma teacher or the Dharma. Up to here, from page 271 up to here, these are all offenses that relate to the 6 paramitas. In other words, they're grouped according to each of them. So the first group of them have to do with generosity. Second group have to do with morality. Third have to do with patience. And so up to here. So offenses that relate specifically to each of the 6 paramitas. Starting 293, there's another group that are of offenses that are antithetical to the 11 ways of assisting others. So that's on page 300. And it's just read. You go through this, you have a much more, I don't know, I think you'll have a much clearer sense of what practice is about, and it gives you confidence. So that's taking this time. And then session on page 301. There's something about that. And then on 302, there's something about taking the vows yourself if you don't have a qualified preceptor. I said, don't do that. Don't do that. Let's see. Somewhere in here it tells you what teacher you should take the vows from. Where is it? Well, so for that, way back on 265, the paragraph for the last half of the page. In the acceptance of this system of moral discipline should not be received from all bodhisattvas, even they may be knowledgeable. But should not receive the vows from someone who lacks faith, and so on. So there's sort of the qualifications from whom to take the bodhisattva. Okay? So up to here, and after we got you can read it. I hope covered kind of the main point. Then this is all within the category of all-inclusive morality, which is those 3 categories of restraint, collecting and helping others, as well as transgressions. Then is the other categories of those 10, and so they're on page 305. It starts out the moral to carry out, the moralities direct everywhere, and so on. These are the rest of these 9, and it concludes. So the biggest chapter in the text, and probably for that reason considered the most important. A lot more in the book, which I wish I had to go over. I hope I haven't imposed on you by making you listen for this long. And then it was a pleasure to come and talk about the book. I would not have dared to propose it underneath. So I was asked, and good to see you all. So send it here. Okay? The one copy here is not on the table. I brought 8 copies with me. I didn't know how many people were going to come. It looks like they're all gone. I would advise you, yeah, it's published by Shambhala. Shambhala, the price is $55. It's $35. So, it's the same book. So, that's okay. Don't do